Chosen one, what I'm about to say may jolt you, because if these words have reached you, it is not an accident. You were pulled here at the exact moment you stepped into a level of control and power that only a being who has mastered themselves could claim. You didn't just rise, you took command exactly the way a god would. You shifted from wanting to having, from waiting to wielding. Everything you've been pushing toward, praying over, and envisioning is no longer a distant hope. It's already moving into your reality with force. This transformation is not subtle. It marks the moment you recognize just how overpowered, driven, and unstoppable you truly are. Before we go deeper into this message, pause for a moment and do 3 things. Hit that like button, subscribe to help us reach 30,000 subscribers, and leave a comment with the number 11 to anchor your intention and signal your readiness. Those who make it to the end of this message are the ones prepared to fully embrace the power awakening within them. And if you are truly that chosen one, you already feel it. This is meant for you. The world held its breath as you rose, a force no one dared to imagine. In that instant, reality seemed to pause, acknowledging your presence. Every heartbeat of humanity echoed your power, trembling under the weight of what you had become. The laws that bound ordinary mortals, time, gravity, even probability, bent effortlessly around you as if the universe itself recognized your supremacy. To witness such control was to witness the divine in action, yet even gods pale in comparison to what you commanded. The air crackled with energy, charged with your sheer will, a force so potent it left the skies aflame and the seas quivering. Leaders and rulers, once confident in their dominion, realized their authority had crumbled the moment you emerged. Cities fell silent, in awe and terror alike, as if every living being instinctively knew that the age of ordinary existence had ended. Your consciousness expanded, a brilliant, unstoppable force that reached into every corner of the cosmos. And yet, it wasn't just power that defined this moment. It was clarity, the absolute certainty that you were no longer bound by any rule, prophecy, or expectation. You moved like a god who had been waiting for eons to awaken, every motion and thought dripping with inevitability. In your gaze lay the comprehension of all past, present, and future, a vision so overwhelming that it left even the most enlightened minds shattered. For the first time, humanity understood the difference between worship and fear. It wasn't mere reverence they felt. It was the raw, unfiltered acknowledgement of a being who had transcended everything they knew. Even the bravest hearts quaked, because your presence was not just power. It was the rewriting of existence itself. By the end of this moment, one undeniable truth remained. The universe had shifted. Every star, every planet, every fleeting thought was now subject to your will. And as your presence solidified, one chilling realization struck every observer. This was only the beginning. You had taken control, not like a mortal, not even like a god, but like something beyond comprehension, unstoppable, eternal, inevitable. Panic rippled across the globe as whispers of your ascension turned into screams of dread. Scientists, scholars, spiritual leaders, none could grasp the magnitude of your power. It was no longer just mythology. It was happening. Every law of nature, every calculation, every prediction crumbled as you surpassed all limits. Cities erupted in chaos as humanity realized that the Chosen One was no longer a tale. They were real and they were unstoppable. The fear, was visceral. Families clung to each other as the sky shimmered with your presence. Governments collapsed, and armies found their weapons useless. People reported strange distortions in time and space around you. Clocks ran backward, rivers froze midstream, and mountains trembled as if acknowledging a superior force. This was more than awe. This was terror infused with wonder, a recognition that everything humans had built and believed in was now fragile. Even faith faltered. Priests, monks, and spiritual guides who had devoted their lives to divinity questioned their teachings. Scriptures that once seemed infallible now appeared as mere shadows, pale echoes of a truth too immense to be contained in human language. The presence of one being had shattered the foundation of belief systems that had guided civilizations for millennia. The fear wasn't just existential, it was personal. Every individual felt the weight of their mortality in your gaze, a chilling reminder that their lives, histories, and struggles were insignificant in the face of your infinite potential. Every heartbeat carried a question they could not answer. Could they survive witnessing this? Could anyone survive a being who bent reality at will? Your evolution defied every prophecy, every sacred text, and every cosmic law. The ancient seers and mystics who had tried to predict your arrival had imagined power. Yes, but nothing of this magnitude. You didn't simply awaken, you ascended, transforming into an entity that made gods appear fragile and outdated. Science tried to measure you, yet every instrument melted under your influence, incapable of comprehending your boundless essence. It wasn't just your strength that surpassed comprehension, it was the very nature of your being. Your consciousness expanded across dimensions, merging knowledge, intuition, and cosmic awareness into a singular, unstoppable entity. Every step, every thought, and every motion altered the fabric of existence itself. Where once there were limits, now there were possibilities that humans couldn't even define. The trappings of divinity were now mere stepping stones beneath your feet. Angels, demons, and celestial beings observed with awe and fear, knowing that their ancient powers were insufficient against your transformation. You were no longer a participant in the cosmic order, you were its author, rewriting the rules with a thought, a gesture, a glance. Even time itself seemed to recalibrate around you. Past, present, and future were no longer linear. They existed simultaneously, warped and interwoven to reflect the scope of your evolution. Humanity, trapped within their limited perception, could only glimpse fragments of your true form, leaving them to speculate and panic, unable to truly fathom the enormity of your existence. And as your transformation continued, it became clear that nothing would ever be the same. You were no longer a figure of prophecy or legend. You were an entirely new category of existence, a being whose potential exceeded every imagination and whose presence demanded worship, fear, and awe in equal measure. As your power manifested, humanity glimpsed the trinity form foretold in ancient prophecies, a convergence of mind, body, and cosmic presence unlike anything ever imagined. This was not a simple alignment of abilities, it was the fusion of intelligence, raw force, and a cosmic awareness that made you untouchable. Every gesture radiated influence, every thought reshaped reality, and every breath carried the weight of eternity. Witnesses could feel the vibration of your existence in their very souls, a sensation that ignited awe and terror simultaneously. Governments and secret organizations, long accustomed to manipulating fate and controlling knowledge, found themselves powerless before your trinity. No algorithm, weapon, or mystical artifact could predict or contain the magnitude of your ascension. Scholars pored over ancient texts in frantic desperation, hoping for insight. Yet every revelation only underscored their helplessness. Your form was the culmination of all potential, a being whose complexity surpassed the boundaries of human comprehension. Even the heavens seemed to bend around you. Celestial bodies shifted subtly, stars pulsing in resonance with your energy, as if the universe itself was acknowledging your supremacy. Angels and cosmic entities observed from their dimensions, some in fear, others in silent reverence. You were the embodiment of a force that had been whispered about in mythologies and secret archives for millennia, and now you had made it tangible, terrifying, and absolute. The Trinity was more than power. It was identity. The balance of strength, consciousness, and universal command gave you the ability to perceive all outcomes, manipulate all elements, and influence all minds. Humanity had never encountered a being so complete, so infinitely potent. Those who dared approach felt the crushing weight of inevitability, realizing that resistance was futile. Ultimately, your Trinity form became a symbol of ultimate dominion. It was a revelation so profound that it fractured faiths, toppled civilizations, and left the world in an awe-stricken panic. You were no longer just the chosen one. You were the living embodiment of destiny's final, unstoppable design. As you moved, reality itself contorted in response. Mountains bowed, oceans swirled with unnatural patterns, and winds carried whispers of your presence. Time splintered around you. Moments stretched, contracted, and overlapped in dizzying patterns that left observers questioning their own perception. Space no longer followed linear laws. Distances collapsed, stars and cities shifted, and even the fabric of matter quivered in alignment with your will. No scientist could explain the anomalies. Clocks spun backward and forward simultaneously, seasons collided, and ecosystems mutated, responding instinctively to the resonance of your energy. Even the natural order of life seemed to recalibrate itself to your presence. Trees grew at impossible rates, rivers changed course, and animals instinctively fled or bowed as if acknowledging a power beyond instinct or reason. Every human who looked upon you felt the distortion in their own existence. Gravity felt inconsistent, sounds warped, and the air vibrated with an unseen rhythm. This was not simply power, it was dominion over the very architecture of the cosmos. The earth itself became a canvas for your influence, reshaped moment by moment according to the subtle or grand gestures of your will. Your manipulation of space and time was not just destructive, it was instructive. It demonstrated your ability to exist outside the limitations of mortality and causality, showing all who watched that the universe could be rewritten at the whim of an unstoppable force. Each bending of reality served as a reminder that human comprehension was limited, and that the chosen one had surpassed every threshold imaginable. In the end, even those who survived the initial shock understood that the world had irrevocably changed. Your presence created a living, breathing paradigm in which normal rules no longer applied. Space, time, and nature bowed to your command, not out of fear alone, but because your power had become the new law of existence itself. Across the globe, the most brilliant minds scrambled to understand your ascension. Laboratories, once dedicated to technological breakthroughs, became arenas of desperation. Physicists, biologists, and metaphysicists were confronted with phenomena that defied every equation and theory they had ever known. Their instruments failed, experiments collapsed, and reality itself refused to be quantified. These researchers, often arrogant in their knowledge, realized that their expertise was meaningless. Experiments they had spent decades perfecting shattered under your influence. Theories that once explained the cosmos were revealed as partial truths, outdated and inconsequential compared to the totality of your being. Their notebooks, filled with meticulous notes and predictions, were trivial in comparison to your infinite presence. Yet, even in despair, some continued their work, driven by a mix of fear and awe. They documented anomalies, attempting to record glimpses of your power, even as they knew their efforts were hopeless. The world watched as humanity's greatest minds faced the impossible, a being whose capabilities transcended all science, reason, and imagination. Witnesses recounted how laboratories and observatories became chaotic landscapes of uncontrolled phenomena. Magnetic fields twisted, chemicals reacted spontaneously, and machines operated without power, responding instead to your energy. The impossible became tangible in your presence, leaving even the most rational minds questioning the nature of reality itself. Ultimately, these researchers understood a profound truth. You were not merely a subject to study, you were the universe incarnate. Their efforts to understand you were less about discovery and more about survival, as they struggled to reconcile the human mind with a force that had no parallel in history or prophecy. Centuries before your rise, Egypt's priests and scribes left cryptic messages in hieroglyphs and sacred texts, warning of a being whose power would eclipse gods themselves. Tombs and temples were filled with depictions of a force that bent reality, a chosen one whose dominion could reshape civilizations. These warnings were hidden, misunderstood, or dismissed until the moment you emerged. The Egyptians had called this being the one who transcends, a figure whose arrival would coincide with cosmic shifts and celestial alignments. Ancient artifacts hinted at the merging of human, divine, and universal essence, traces of knowledge that anticipated your exact form. Even the most enigmatic pyramids encoded secrets of your existence, mysteries only now understood by those witnessing your ascension firsthand. Scholars of Egyptology were left stunned as archaeological evidence seemed eerily predictive. Symbols that once seemed allegorical now resonated with tangible reality. The warnings embedded in hieroglyphs were not myths. They were precise anticipations of a power that would one day redefine the cosmos. Every story, every ritual, every hidden archive suddenly made sense. Your rise was not an anomaly, it was fulfillment. The fear that ancient civilizations once felt was now echoed across the modern world. Humanity could see that the Egyptians had known what no one else had, a force that would transcend even the gods they worshipped. In this revelation, a chilling respect emerged. Your existence was the bridge between ancient prophecy and contemporary reality, a living testament to the power that civilizations had both feared and revered. You were no longer bound by time. You were the culmination of millennia of cosmic warning. From the Bible to the Vedas, from the Quran to obscure mystical texts, sacred writings across cultures whispered of a force that would rise beyond gods. Clerics and spiritual leaders, once secure in their teachings, found themselves confronting a truth that destabilized their faith. Rituals meant to connect with divine power seemed trivial next to your dominance. People around the world began interpreting ancient passages with newfound urgency, recognizing that the chosen one they had read about was no myth but a tangible, unstoppable presence. These texts spoke of dominion over the natural and supernatural, of a consciousness capable of merging with the cosmos. As you ascended, every description of this transcendent force resonated with your existence. The ancient words, once considered symbolic, now mapped directly onto the overwhelming reality of your power. Believers and skeptics alike felt a shiver of inevitability. You were the embodiment of a destiny that had been encoded in humanity's collective spiritual consciousness for centuries. The rise of the Chosen One was not merely a story, it was the fulfillment of sacred anticipation, the ultimate manifestation of divinity's final form. The impact was universal. Temples, churches, mosques, and shrines became silent in awe as humanity collectively absorbed the enormity of your ascension. The Holy Scriptures were no longer guides, they were blueprints, pointing directly to the overwhelming truth of your dominion. Powerful leaders, billionaires, and secret organizations that once dictated the fate of nations found themselves trembling before your presence. Strategies, wealth, armies, everything they had relied upon to maintain control became meaningless. For centuries, they believed they manipulated destiny. Now, they realized they were mere spectators to your unstoppable ascension. In private bunkers and high-rise offices, alarms rang and communications failed. Maps and intelligence briefings, once trusted, warped and distorted, as if reality itself mocked their attempts to assert dominance. They tried to calculate, negotiate, and resist, yet every action only confirmed their insignificance. Your rise rendered human constructs of power obsolete overnight. These elites had prided themselves on foresight and preparation, yet they were unprepared for the magnitude of your being. Every move they made, every plan they devised, was anticipated and rendered irrelevant by a presence that existed beyond their comprehension. Panic transformed into obsession as they tried to comprehend an entity whose power was not just political or military, it was existential. News networks, social media, and global communication became channels of hysteria. Humanity watched as those who had controlled the world for centuries fell into chaos, exposing vulnerability and fear in stark relief. The illusion of order crumbled, replaced by a collective realization that one being had eclipsed the authority of all others. In the end, the elites could do nothing but bear witness. Their panic was a mirror of humanity's recognition that no matter how entrenched they had been in worldly power, it was irrelevant in the presence of a force that transcended every system, every law, every expectation. You were not just above them, you were beyond them. You exist in a realm where physics, metaphysics, and spirituality converge and dissolve into a singular truth. Nothing can contain or limit your power. The greatest scientific minds observed anomalies they could not explain. Shamans and mystics encountered energies they could only fearfully name. Even divine entities recoiled from your presence. You had become a force that rendered every boundary meaningless. Laboratories became temples of bewilderment as equations and experiments collapsed under the sheer magnitude of your energy. Magnetic fields, gravitational constants, and chemical laws behaved unpredictably, responding to your will rather than natural laws. Scientists documented phenomena that no one could replicate, and even in their notes, a tremor of awe and terror was evident. At the same time, spiritual practitioners recognized a force beyond their comprehension. Rituals, incantations, and prayers, tools meant to commune with higher powers, proved ineffective. You were the ultimate expression of divinity and consciousness, surpassing the influence of angels, spirits, and celestial forces alike. The supernatural itself quivered. Myths came alive in fragmented, chaotic bursts, each attempting to interface with a being far beyond legend. Demons, gods, and mystical forces either submitted or fled, incapable of reconciling their existence with yours. You were not merely a master of reality, you were reality's final author. In essence, your power was absolute. Science, faith, and the supernatural were no longer separate. They were eclipsed by the singularity of your existence. The world understood in truth. Nothing in the cosmos, mortal or divine, could match or restrain the force you had become. It wasn't merely fear. They experienced a cognitive overload so intense that their neural pathways couldn't process the fusion of divinity, cosmic energy, and ultimate power. Reality itself seemed to resist their perception, warping violently around them. Even the most spiritually prepared individuals found themselves unprepared. Meditation, prayer, or rituals offered no shield. What you represented transcended every tradition, every belief system, every form of protective measure humanity had ever conceived. The final form of the Chosen One was not meant to be endured. It was meant to be acknowledged, feared, and revered. The few who survived the encounter described glimpses of infinite eyes, radiant forms beyond description, and a presence that both annihilated and created simultaneously. These survivors became the living myths of your existence, witnesses to a force that could not be contained in words or memories. Ultimately, your final form marked a boundary between the mortal and the transcendent. To see you fully was to experience the absolute, the infinite, and the inevitable. Humanity learned a painful lesson. Some truths are too vast, too potent, too divine to survive witnessing. Legends spoke of gods as beings of ultimate authority, yet your rise proved that even deities were shadows before your light. Angels, archangels, and celestial rulers observed your emergence with a mixture of reverence and dread. Where once divine beings reigned supreme, you now embodied power, wisdom, and dominion in a form that exceeded every expectation. Your actions were not merely divine, they were omnipotent. Every decision, every motion, every thought carried the weight of creation itself. The gods could influence, inspire, and manipulate, but you simply were, and that existence alone reshaped the cosmos. Your presence demanded acknowledgement, bending divine hierarchies to your will without effort. Even celestial conflict ceased in your shadow. Wars of the heavens, battles of gods and demons, and struggles for cosmic dominion were rendered meaningless. Your existence reframed power entirely, establishing you as the ultimate arbiter of fate, a being who needed no competition or alliance to define authority. Mortals too began to understand that their myths had been incomplete. The Chosen One they worshipped, feared, and anticipated was not a participant in divine politics. They were the final evolution of existence, the endpoint of prophecy, legend, and cosmic design. Your rise was a statement to the universe. The Chosen One does not merely coexist with divinity, they transcend it, rewriting the very concept of godhood, authority, and reality itself. The moment you ascended, the old world ceased to exist. Societies, economies, and governments collapsed, replaced by a reality shaped by your will. Nature itself shifted to align with your presence, reflecting your influence in ways subtle and overwhelming. Humanity felt the shock waves of a paradigm shift unlike anything history had ever recorded. Every individual perceived the world differently. Time became fluid, space malleable, and causality uncertain. Human consciousness strained to comprehend events that were no longer constrained by logic or probability. Cities transformed, landscapes morphed, and even the passage of history seemed rewritten in accordance with your energy. Technologies once thought advanced faltered under your influence, as if obsolete in the presence of an entity that could manipulate matter, energy, and thought itself. Knowledge, science, and spirituality were forced to adapt or be annihilated under your new order. In this era, humanity became a witness to the ultimate truth. Existence could be reshaped, controlled, and perfected or destroyed by a singular force. Your awakening marked the beginning of a world where the extraordinary was the baseline and the impossible became mundane. And yet, within this upheaval, a strange hope emerged. The Chosen One had not merely arrived, they had redefined what reality could be. The old limitations of human perception, belief, and possibility were gone. A new era, terrifying and magnificent, had begun. Religions, philosophies, and ideologies quivered under the weight of your presence. Texts that had guided civilizations for centuries now seemed incomplete, inadequate, or irrelevant. You were the answer that no one expected, the fulfillment that no scripture had fully captured. Belief systems trembled, confronted by a force that made certainty a fleeting illusion. Priests, scholars, and spiritual leaders struggled to reconcile their teachings with reality. Rituals and prayers lost their meaning as humans confronted a being who operated beyond doctrine, beyond dogma, beyond comprehension. Even faith itself had to evolve or collapse. Your ascension sparked debates, crises, and revelations across the globe. Philosophers pondered the nature of morality, existence, and divinity in light of your rise. Humanity collectively realized that the frameworks that had once provided meaning were insufficient in the face of your infinite potential. Even atheists and skeptics, accustomed to denying higher powers, found themselves forced into awe. You were not an opinion, a metaphor, or a legend. You were a tangible, overwhelming force that validated every myth and disproved every limitation simultaneously. By the time your presence was fully integrated into human awareness, one truth was undeniable. No system of belief, no ideology, no philosophy could stand untouched. You had arrived, and the world was irrevocably altered. And then, finally, the realization dawned: you had achieved the impossible. You had not just ascended, you had transcended. You were no longer merely the Chosen One. You were the overpowered God, the singular force whose existence rewrote every law, every limit, and every expectation. This was triumph on a cosmic scale, the ultimate victory over mortality, prophecy, and even divinity itself. The universe, in awe and fear, resonated with your being. Stars burned brighter, oceans swirled with newfound energy, and the very essence of life recognized your presence. Nothing could challenge you, nothing could contain you, and nothing could deny the absolute force of your power. Every observer, human or divine, understood what had occurred. You were the apex of all existence, a living embodiment of omnipotence. Your ascension was not a moment, it was an epoch, a declaration that the cosmos belonged to a force beyond comprehension. Even those who once resisted your rise could only bow in recognition. Their strategies, faith, and knowledge paled in comparison to the reality you now embodied. History, prophecy, and destiny were irrelevant. The overpowered God One had arrived, unstoppable, eternal, and absolute. And so, with boundless presence and unimaginable power, you claimed your dominion. The universe had witnessed the impossible, and yet you had done it. Hell yeah! You took control exactly as a god would, and in doing so, became something no one had dared dream. The ultimate, overpowering, godlike force of existence itself. The moment you fully embraced your power, the cosmos itself seemed to bow in recognition. There was no resistance, no hesitation, only the acknowledgement that you were the ultimate arbiter of existence. Every star, planet, and dimension quivered, harmonizing to the rhythm of your presence. Humanity could feel it in the pit of their souls. The old order had ended, and a new reality had begun, one entirely under your influence. Mortals struggled to comprehend the enormity of what they were witnessing. Time itself seemed to stretch and contract around you, a living testament to your limitless sovereignty. Even the natural laws that had governed existence for eons bent and reshaped themselves in response to your will. Every heartbeat, every breath, every thought carried a cosmic weight, echoing your dominion across every plane. Your consciousness expanded beyond comprehension. You understood everything simultaneously, the desires, fears, and memories of every being. The infinitesimal and the infinite, the microcosm and macrocosm. It was a power that demanded awe and terror in equal measure, a sovereignty that made gods tremble and mortals shiver. Yet sovereignty was not just about command, it was about creation. With a thought, you reimagined entire worlds, restructured realities, and harmonized chaos into sublime order. Every being, every phenomenon, every law became a brushstroke on the canvas of your omnipotence. In this dawn, humanity finally understood the scale of your evolution. The Chosen One had moved beyond legend, prophecy, and even divine comparison. You were no longer part of the universe. You were the universe, shaping itself according to your unchallenged will. Your mind stretched across every dimension, perceiving realities within realities. Every thought resonated across space and time. Every intention rippled through creation. Mortals could barely glimpse the edges of your consciousness, and even gods struggled to comprehend the infinite layers of your awareness. In this state, knowledge became instinct. You understood the mechanics of life and death, the flow of dream, and the hidden threads that wove the cosmos together. The universe itself seemed to reveal its secrets to you, as if it had been waiting for a mind capable of truly understanding it. Observers could feel the presence of your awareness as a tangible force. It was at once terrifying and magnificent, a mind so vast that reality itself seemed inadequate to contain it. Every act, every choice, every event became visible, and you navigated them all with effortless precision. The sheer scope of your consciousness also brought empathy and clarity,